Beware of APNU, beware the AFC and Nagamutu. Our constitution is in jeopardy. They're holding on to power for the oil money. Now after 4 years of incompetence, Bharat moved the vote of
Mr. Rajkumar, no.
But if you put them back,
Mr.
they're warning you.
Yes,
Guyana
yes.
will be worse than 92. They Durban corrupt, they thief the money. Durban Park corrupt, they thief the money. The ministers corrupt, they thief the money. They live in the good life with our money. On election.
APNU AFC promised more jobs and a good life. Instead, we lost 30,000 jobs. Taxes went up, people are less safe, and cost of living skyrocketed. Now, after 4 years of neglect and corruption, the APNU AFC gang are coming with more empty promises, only cause they need you now. We are smart. Fool me once, shame on you. This time, we will not be fooled by your sneaky fake news APNU promises. We vote in PPPC to get Guyana working again.
Thank you for joining me once again. And if you believe we have hope for our nation come March 2nd, raise your fist with me, because we really have to look forward to what a new administration will bring to our nation. We've got a great decade ahead of us. We've got a young Dr. Irfan Ali, ready to be president of our nation with his team to transform our nation. As you listen to some of his plans and vision, it's an exciting moment to know that there is hope for our nation, and then our Vision 2020 will be articulated as the manifesto is released in the next couple of weeks, and we understand what it takes to manage a nation. And you listen to many commentators out there. You've seen a lot of new parties pop up. You've seen the government, caretaker government, try to articulate what they couldn't have done. You're going to hear a lot of rhetoric out there, but you've got to be cognizant of the fact that it takes more than words. It takes a plan. It takes initiatives. It takes a financial model. It takes a longer view mission, longer view look at what will happen when a project is implemented. You have to look at all the resources that you have. You have to look at your tax system. And as you put all that together and you put a plan to ensure that our people benefit from that, that is what you will find in the PPP manifesto. It's an actual implementation plan that will produce the results that we all were looking for, continued from where the PPP left off, and ensuring that simple things like you think a house lot that was done under the PPP government previously, and when you look at the last 4.5 years, no house lot has been given out, and you see, Minister Hughes, the caretaker minister, that shouldn't really be sitting in that position, go out to people and tell them, well, they're still working and figuring out how to do house lots 4.5 years later. As you study what have happened over the last year, it is somewhat of a sad case. We're coming up to 1 year since the no confidence vote in December of 2018. We all know what the Constitution called for, election within 3 months of that date. And Mr. Granger may look at you and says he won. He may look at you and says, wow, we beat the PPP, we beat everything. Look, we're going to have election until 2020. But Mr. Granger did not win. One, he broke the law. He trampled on our democracy. He allowed the legislative system to be embarrassed around the world. That is the sad part Mr. Granger has done. So I don't see why he would go around telling people that, he'll do what he wants, because the aftershock on our system is tremendous. If you look around you, the economy, we know, is struggling, extremely struggling right now. You can drive down Regent Street on any work day, busy day, weekends, and see the struggle of people in their disposable funds for shopping. Many people are worried about the holidays coming up. So many people out of work. And interesting enough, last week I mentioned something about the government building their own asphalt plant asphalt is what we put on the roads, and 160 tons a day. They are now going to be their own contractor. So they're going to put a lot of contractors out of business. And they are trying to create a bigger government, because now you're going to have to hire people to build your own roads. And first, instead of giving those contractors the work, and contractors we know pay higher salaries than government. So Mr. Granger started out, wants to build a bigger government. And then Minister Jordan, the minister that ought to be fired, and in their caretaker role, they've really struggled over the last year and over the last 4.5 years. So Mr. Jordan said that government is too big. It is burdensome on the government for the tax system, and he actually said 20,000 people more ought to be fired or let go out of government. We know Mr. Granger fired 7,000 sugar workers. So how are we going to defend our nation? How are we going to take care of our own national interests when you've got Mr. Granger a few months left in office trying to take away jobs from contractors, and then on the other hand, the person handling the money said government is too big, we need to fire more workers. So we got to be very careful. As if you're a public servant, you got to be very concerned that you don't get fired before March, so that they can try to pay the bills. They are struggling to manage our economy. Imagine we ran out of money to buy fuel for GPL last week, and there was no fuel, blackouts 8 hours plus over the weekend. When a government runs out of money to buy fuel, and we're talking about a great economy, an oil economy, they can manage basic entities, basic management, public servants, no bonuses this year, as in the last 4 years. The PPP under the administration, every joint forces got a bonus, and that's one of the commitments by Dr. Ali, is to ensure that those bonuses come back. So we do have hope in 2020. We've got a great plan and implementable. So as you listen to the rhetoric out there and you listen to the failed promises that APNU will come with again, understand this: it takes more than words to manage an economy. We are going to be one of the largest economy in the hemisphere. And when you look at reports such as this week, when the IMF said that our debt ratio to our foreign reserve is the highest in the region, what is Mr. Granger doing? He can't manage money. We know he can't manage money. You just got to look where he was prior to 2015 when he became president. He had a nice, little house, didn't have any fancy cars, or didn't seem to have a lot of money. Today, if you watch on Remembrance Day, the man's driving in a beautiful black sedan. You've got about 20 bodyguards around the car driving in slow motion. You've got men and policemen on horses riding around him. What does Mr. Granger think he is? Guyana needs to go forward. We want a nation that makes our people's lives better. So in the last few months, we know Mr. Granger is giving away our natural resources to foreigners. We know he's giving out land to of his own people so that they can have a windfall maybe after election, knowing that they're going to lose. We know the contracts that he has signed and negotiated are very, very poor. And ultimately, it hurts our economy. So the aftershock of what has happened to Guyana and what has to be rebuilt in 2020 is going to be significant. So when you look at what our plan entails, when you study what Dr. Ali has outlined in terms of the vision and mission for Guyana, how he will ensure that our people, and ultimately every time I hear him speak, and he can talk extremely complex in terms of what our economy needs to go through in order to transform our nation. And then he comes right back to the one thing we all want to hear. What's for me? What do I get out of it, Dr. Ali? And that's what ultimately he comes back to. is he's fighting for the rights of our people. He's fighting for our economics so that we can benefit. You know, when we talk about tax reduction and no new taxes in the next 5 years, when we talk of taking tax off of data, off of electricity and water, I see a lot of people copying that now. They can't come up with their own plan, so they're using some of these same terminology I'm using. I think a new party called Change Guyana said that today, no taxes on data. Well, Dr. Ali has outlined those initiatives. He has said no taxes on water and electricity. He's going to reverse those 200 plus taxes. He's going to look at increasing the threshold, the tax threshold, relooking at creating money. Money makes money. And as we look at the investments coming into our countries, we look at transforming our productive sectors. As we make money, as the country makes money, those mandatory services, mandatory taxes that had to happen in order to keep government going will go away. And that's where you look at where you can create revenues, not debt. We know the debt ratio, as I mentioned, is the highest in the region. Mr. Granger is borrowing money left and right. Imagine can't pay for fuel. That is a sad case. So, ladies and gentlemen, my brothers and sisters, this election is not about the politics of the PNC, APNU, even the PPP, or anybody else. This election is about us. 2020 is our time. We may have dreamt for decades of a future when we say Guyana have potential. Now we have opportunities, real opportunities. Ultimately, when you have opportunities, you want to put that entrepreneur, you want to put that passionate person, you want to put that educated, understanding, especially our economics. Somebody that is caring enough to ensure that all of us got a benefit. That is what this election is going to be about. It's going to be about who do you see managing our nation in the future. What does it take to ensure that our population benefits? And that what I believe very strongly, without reservation, that Dr. Irfan Ali will be one of the greatest presidents we would have ever had, a working president, somebody that understands, you know, what life is like to grow up. I listened to a little clip that was out on television today that Dr. Ali talked about growing up. You know, when he talked about his parents being educators that served Guyana. You know, he grew up, you know, swimming in the Essequibo River. He grew up picking wood off, you know, to go and bring back to home. He learned what it's like to travel from the West Bank there to come to St. Stanislaus College. He learned what it took, you know, to get your homework done in blackouts. And, you know, he understands what life was like and what life should not be as we look at transforming our nation. When you think of kids over the weekend had their projects to do and they couldn't get on the computer, they couldn't see in the night to study. Dr. Ali understands that. He grew up in an era under the dictatorship of Burnham that saw his parents suffer. He listened to the stories. He's a young man, but he has seen the hardships and he wants to ensure, and he worked hard as a government minister on the PPP to ensure people get better housing. He looked across the board in our tourism industry and expanded that service. He was one of the hardest working ministers in government, and I will say that very proudly because I know it's true. And given this opportunity now to be the presidential candidate of the PPP and given the opportunity to be the president of Guyana, that is what it will take to ensure that people benefit. You know, when you compare that to Mr. Granger driving a beautiful sedan paid by our taxpayers' money down Main Street with all those security guards around him, with all the horses, and you wonder, what does he think our nation is? A royalty? He looks more like North Korea, where, you know, the leaders like to be pompous. They like to celebrate that they're the best. Mr. Granger even said it on national radio the other day that people in Guyana loves him. And I don't know where he has gone in Guyana where people tell him they love him, because love requires duty, service to the nation. And Mr. Granger in 4.5 years cannot prove to any of us that he had service to the nation. Dr. Ali can show you what he has done as minister of multiple ministries, and what he will do as the president of Guyana. So this election, for those who have not picked up their ID cards, your name is published somewhere. Look on the list. Get ready for what March 2nd will look like. You've got to be very, very cognizant of what could happen on that day. We know the PNC is trying their best to confuse the system. We know their history of rigging. I grew up under that environment. I remember one time my parents didn't go vote. I think it was in 1973, and nobody that I saw around that I knew went and voted. But yes, Mr. Burnham won the election by 90-something% when hundreds of thousands of people stayed home and didn't vote. We don't want that this election at all. We've got to be very cognizant of the environment we live in. We know the plans. I've heard of security companies being established and files being created so people can potentially have guns out there. We are not going to be fearful. We are going to stand fast. You've got to be ready. This is an election, but all of us and PNC supporters, I urge you. I've been there. I've seen what Mr. Granger couldn't do for Guyana. You all had high hopes for him, and I know a lot of you are disappointed why Mr. Granger just failed to understand what a president ought to do. He failed to get out of his little bubble. He failed to walk the streets. He failed to implement an economic plan that will change our nation for the better. And as you look and says, well, he's your party leader, and loyalty, and I will vote for my party leader. I want to ask you to re-look at that concept. What is it you want for Guyana? What is it you want? Turn and look at that young child in your living room right now. All of us across Guyana. Tomorrow when you drive the streets, look at those school children as they cross the road, as they put on their uniform, well decked out, going and try to get a better education that Dr. Ali said will be one of his #1 priority, to ensure that all Guyanese get the level of education they need and be ready, not just in education, an education to be ready for the transformation Guyana will see over the next decade. So as you look at those children tomorrow or in your living rooms tonight, this election is about them. You've had the opportunity to see what Mr. Granger can do. You can't say you did not give him a chance. You did. Bless your heart. You give him a chance. He has failed. He has failed you. He made a lot of promises that he couldn't deliver. And now Mr. Jordan is going to tell you as a public servant that 20,000 of you ought to be fired because they can't afford to pay such big government. And then on the other hand, Mr. Granger is building an asphalt plant to take away a job from contractors. You got to understand why we're saying do not allow Mr. Granger any more time in office, because you will ultimately suffer too if you vote for him. And again, you may not like the PPP for whatever reason. In the past, they may have done some things that maybe you didn't like. But I believe as a PNC supporter, you've got to look forward to what a different administration would do. What did the PPP learn in 4.5 years? What did they come back with? And when you see the plans Dr. Ali is outlining, you will know that he came back with a plan that will ensure every single Guyanese across all regions, regardless of race, regardless of color of your skin, regardless of texture of your hair, regardless of where you live, what you do, what is your social life like. He is committed to becoming a president that walks the street and take care of the people of our nation. And that is what you call a servant. So as you listen to him describe his parents being educators and serving Guyana, that's what Dr. Ali learned over the years, that ultimately when you serve the people of a nation, you will be determined to be a good person. And when you understand the economics, when you understand what it takes to transform Guyana, and when you look across the industry, when you see something, as I mentioned earlier in the program, you can buy fuel for GPL. And when you look at what Dr. Ali is outlining in his energy plan and how we will look at the natural gas and an integrated energy solution, when you look back at what Dr. Jaglio had done and the vision that he had for Amalia Falls, he predicted that Guyana will need the energy. We will need the energy to transform. Now we're 4.5 years behind. Amalia Falls would have been implemented already. Dr. Ali has recreated an integrated solution that will look at our fossil fuels, look at our natural gas, will look at our solar power or hydropower or wind power integrated to ensure whatever that 180, 200 megawatts, 300 megawatts we will need, very soon, reliable energy come into play as quickly as possible. And as we do that, all of the other sectors around it starts to flourish. And you look at, again, I mentioned over the life of the program, billions of dollars is spent in the Caribbean on food, $10 billion. Guyana is poised to feed the Caribbean. We have talked about this for decades. Our Vision 2020 is about to come true. As we look at the financial model, how do you finance these large projects? It's not giving away our land to foreigners. It's not giving away land and bad agreements. It's understanding how our people can ensure that they're part of the equity. If a company is coming into Guyana that is going to do large-scale agriculture, they need to partner with a local entity. That local entity needs to have equity in that corporation. That local entity and people, farmers, need to make money off of our produce. We haven't worked the rice fields or the sugar fields not to finally benefit from it. We have earned the right to benefit from our land and from our resources, Mr. Granger. So please stop giving it away. Stop signing bad deals. And if you're a foreign investor out there, I urge you to look at our local partners, because that is what's going to make you successful. And us as local partners need to look and see what are the new industries that you can be part of. You know, if you look at cattle in Region 5 and you study, you know, with cheaper energy, if you get into pasteurization of milk and dairy products, what that will do for both the local market and the export market. You know, Mr. Granger, this last week gave away hundreds of acres over at Wales, very close to the estate, to some foreign entity that the company wasn't even established when they were negotiating the lease for the land. He didn't give it to our sugar workers. He didn't give it to our rice farmers. He's giving it away to a foreign guy to go and do coconut processing, may create a few jobs. But Mr. Granger, that is given away. The company wasn't even in existence. You know, that is a sad case when you have a man that is not a patriot. He wears his medals on his uniform or on his suit, but has no patriotism, no sense of loyalty and duty to our nation. You've got to have pride. When you have pride, when you have commitment to Guyana, you will ensure our people get better. And that's what the PPP Manifesto will outline. I'm excited because, you know, when I listen to Dr. Ali outline it and how he will implement those plans and vision, and you sit in your living rooms tonight and you ponder about Christmas, about holidays, you ponder about what's going to happen next year, you see what is happening around where government has actually come to a standstill. They don't have money because they have not been able to manage the money. They're borrowing money. Our debt ratio, as I mentioned, is extremely high. Who's going to have to pay that back? It's we, the people, going to have to pay that back. And I'm hoping, and I know Dr. Ali has already put a plan in place to ensure he brings that debt down once again. Dr. Jaglio had to do that in 1992, post-1992, where the debt was so high, you know, you were servicing just debt. There was no money in the system. We are back to that in 2020. Imagine just 4.5 years of giving the PNC one more opportunity to run our country. What did they do with that? They squandered that opportunity. They squat in office. Mr. Granger may have had a better chance if he called the election in March. Maybe he's going to beg for sympathy. But in the last year, the after effects for him being such a bully, holding on to power, disobeying the parliament, the speaker rule, Mr. Granger, you're illegal. The courts rule, Mr. Granger, or Guyana court ruled you're illegal. The Caribbean court ruled that you're illegal. Yet you defy all of that odd. You have a smile on your face thinking you won. But when with that win that you describe is a loss to our people, because we have lost our democracy, we have lost our legislative system, we have lost our economics, we have lost our job. Thousands of people have lost their jobs. And Mr. Granger, come March 2nd, when Mr. Jordan said we should fire 20,000 more workers, guess what? You're part of that 20,000. You will be fired, Mr. Granger. 2020, Mr. Jordan, you are already fired. You shouldn't even been sitting in the role, in the position. You're already resigned. So when you tell the public servants they should be fired, they should tell you back, Mr. Jordan, you're already fired. You're already gone. So you shouldn't even be commenting on things like that. We've got a caretaker role as president. We've got a March 2nd election. We know Mr. Granger must dissolve Parliament by 2nd of December. He's saying he wants to keep Parliament open. The man is just defiant. And defiant dictators fall. You look at Bolivia this week. Defiant dictators fall. Mr. Granger has to devolve Parliament by 2nd of December. He's got to do the proclamation. We're going to have election March 2nd. We're going to have a great campaign, the very clean campaign. You got to pay attention, listen to the outlines, but your mind is already made up. I know that many PNC supporters I talk to, mine is already made up. They know they cannot give Mr. Granger another opportunity to run our country because he has proven he has failed. You know, he has proven in 4.5 years, 0 house lots. He's proven in 4.5 years the debt has gone up. He's proven in 4.5 years that he can fire thousands of workers and he can fire a lot more of you coming up. He has proven that he doesn't know how to manage our economy. He has proven that he's a bully. So we have to study and educate ourselves, educate our children. The Guyana in the next 10 years, the decade of transformation. We need a transformative president. We need someone that will understand what it's like never to go back to the past that we're seeing come in the last 4 years. I can tell you, I grew up without light. And I can tell you what I've seen over the last 4.5 years of Mr. Granger's failure to understand that energy is the key to our economy, and for him to stop the Malia Falls project and then can't afford to buy fuel for GPL tells you that a man that has everything now, he doesn't suffer anymore. He had the biggest medical bill. He was able to fly to Cuba. Cuba people loved him, he said. He mistakenly said Guyana people loved him. He drives in a fancy car. He has all the outriders and security and guards you can want. He's got all the generators and solar panels on his house that he stole from the Amerindian people that was supposed to go to the Amerindian villages. He doesn't understand what it's like to wake up and you don't have water in your showers. He doesn't understand what it's like for those children not to be able to do their homework anymore. His grandkids probably come over to State House and enjoy that good life. Mr. Granger, you're the only one who had the good life. And I urge all Guyanese, let's never give this man an opportunity again to ruin our nation. Let's look forward and let's all of us defend our country. We have to defend our national interests. When you see these agreements and the giveaway of land, it is not about whether it was right or wrong or who got it or who didn't get it. It's wrong because it's our property. Every one of us owns the land in Guyana, and every one of us should have a right to ensure that we defend our national interests. And that's what I urge you to do. I will take a few phone calls. Yes, hello?
Yes, I'm on to the rate. I'm on to you.
Yes, you are.
Yes, I don't know what you're talking, Mr. Granger. Gonna get another 5 years, and people like you will destroy Guyana, gonna suffer. Oh, ma'am.
Thank you very much. I don't know why you would believe Mr. Granger will have another 5 years. When, if you look back on the last decade prior to Mr. Granger, Guyana economy boomed. 4.8% growth. We've had so many new industries created. We've got sustainable industries that Mr. Granger failed to upkeep. Our bauxite, our forestry, our gold, our miners are suffering, our rice, our sugar. Mr. Granger failed in all of that. And if you, the caller said that they want to give Mr. Granger another 5 years, well, you know, you can put your vote where you want, but ultimately you will suffer. But Dr. Ali has made the commitment. Doesn't matter where you put your vote. He will ensure that the industries that have been taken down to the lowest are rebuilt and new industries are taken care of. Yes.
Good night, Mr. Peter.
Good night.
Who already called our car? He cannot get not a day more after the 2nd of March. And he said a good life for everybody is a good life for him because he, with all the panel that he have on his house. So it's a good life for him and the ministers, they're not for anybody else.
Yes.
I just hope I pray if I could sleep tonight and wake up in the morning, it could be the 2nd of March. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that's what I said earlier too, and the caller was right. You know, Mr. Granger doesn't feel the pain. He doesn't understand the pain. He got the best medical care that he could have got because he was able to go to Cuba. There's a young man that died recently of the same disease in the Georgetown Hospital. There's so many people suffering because we don't have the healthcare system. They have degraded the healthcare system. We were building the specialty hospital. They said, why is the PP building a specialty hospital? We were building the specialty hospital to ensure that we have better health care for all our people. That way we don't have to travel to Cuba. We can't afford it. We would have had the health care right here. Mr. Granger failed the system, and March 2nd, again, he will get a chance to know what it's like to be fired out of that office and not ever get an opportunity again to ruin our nation. Hello.
Yeah, Mr. Peter Ramsaroop. If Mr. Granger knows that the health system is so good in Guyana, why is it that he got a Cuba?
That's a very good question. If he believed that he was doing such a good job and people love him, he would have stayed right here and take his chances. Yes. So it tells us, thank you. It tells us because we did not, when Mr. Granger voted, you know, they had 33 seats after 2011, 32 for the PPP. And all 32 members of the PP voted yes for the specialty hospital. You come down to Mr. Granger, 32 of his people. He was the 33rd vote that said to Parliament, cease and desist. Don't build the specialty hospital. Mr. Granger's single vote was the deciding vote that said not specialty hospital. Then he turned around and go to the Cuba for his health care. They said the Marriott was a bad thing. All of them. If you have time in the next couple of days, go visit the Marriott. You'll see all of the ministers hanging out at the Marriott. They, you know, it's like the best thing that could have happened again. And if we didn't have that Marriott hotel today, we would not have had a 5-star hotel to take care of so many of our visitors coming into our country because they all see money. They see Guyana as their future. And that's what I want to make sure. They see Guyana as their future. Dr. Ali sees Guyana as our future. He will fight to ensure that we, the people, get first shot at everything. He wants to ensure we have that first job. He wants to ensure we spend our first oil money. He wants to ensure that all our people are back to work. He wants to ensure our tax systems is the lowest it could possibly be. He doesn't want all those outsiders coming in and taking away things that we should get first. We're not saying it's not big enough to share, but he is going to defend our right as a people to make sure that Guyana people benefits first. Hello.
Hi, good night.
Good night.
Very good. Never sweated on 10 years. Everybody don't talk, y'all are talking about, though. Y'all are talking about 4 years or whatever.
Well, did you? I mean, you sound like an older person. If I can keep you on the line for a second, you saw what Guyana was in 1992. I'm sure you may have grown up and see what Guyana was in 1992. Well, I guess you couldn't want to stay on the line. 1992 to 2015, Guyana moved from a bankrupt economy to a booming economy. Thousands of people were working. Sugar industry was doing well. Rice industry, gold, bauxite, forestry. All happened within the PPP administration. And 4.5 years it took Mr. Granger to do what Mr. Burnham did in 28 years, bring our country back down to where now our debt is higher than it has ever been. So the caller needed to stay on the line because I really did want to ask him some questions. Yes. Good night.
As part of my lady, I think that the president will be in the next 5 years, he's not going to be the president.
Yes, he's not going to be, if I understand you, thanks. He's not going to be the president. Mr. Granger, no way the PNC supporter is going to go back. Some of them will be loyal and some of them will vote for him. I understand that. But if you have young children, you've got a wife and family, you've got a car payment, you want a house lot, you've got to pay mortgages, you want a better job, you want to be benefiting from our new transform economy, you want to ensure that all of you and us get a chance to take care of each other, look at a united, stronger economy, stronger country working together, then your vote needs to go to Dr. Ali, because he and his team and the PP administration will ensure that not just what happened in the past continued, but a transformation of Guyana takes place. And that is what is exciting. We do have hope for 2020. It can't come fast enough, March 2nd. I'm looking forward to fighting with you, defending our rights, defending our people, and looking forward to ensure that the next decade of Guyana is transformed where each of us benefit under Dr. Ali's administration. Thank you for joining me.
Our constitution is in jeopardy. They're holding on to power for the oil money. Now after 4 years of incompetence, Bharat moved the vote of
Mr. Rajkumar, no.
But if you put them back
Mr.
there,
Charandas Prasad, yes,
Guyana
yes.
will be worse than 92. They drug on corrupt, they thief the money. Durban Park corrupt, they thief the money. The ministers corrupt, they thief the money. They live in the good life with our money. On election day, turn out in strength. We put the people.